taking a shower, you can borrow my bathtub. And when I'm asleep, I dream you're moving next week. I crumple the note and slip to put inside my shoebox. The shoebox of lies. It's under my bed, it's never been read. It's in with my school stuff and my mom never cleans that. From my first little fib, when I still wore a bib, to my latest attempt at pretending I'm someone who's not 17 and doesn't know what you mean. When talk tries to single, I'm also stilting on my shoebox. The shoebox of lies. The shoebox. Shoebox of lies. Did somebody tell you this is how it's supposed to be? Or that you just find it and you don't want any more from me?
Hi. Probably a month or two ago, we received an email in from Don Waters who suggested a tutorial on doing kind of a page curl effect. So I'm going to try to do that here. It's not exactly the same as what Don had suggested, or he'd given us a nice example of one. This is probably a little more simplified, I'm not sure, but that's where the idea came from anyways. This is also probably the 6th time I've tried to record this, and so it'll be no surprise if I make even more mistakes than the first 5 times. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it won't be too bad. First things first, I will create a simple rectangle that's going to be my sheet or my photograph if you're going to do a photographic effect. So we'll just make that whatever proportions you want. We'll say it's something, like this is fine. First thing, I want to convert this rectangle into a path. So we'll use object to path. So now this object is a path. I'll double click it to get the node tool, and I'm going to add 2 nodes, one here and one down here, and this is where my page curl is going to happen, at this corner. So, and it doesn't have to be exact. Depending on what effect you want, I'm going to do something like this, add these 2 nodes, and then I'm going to grab this corner node and I'm just going to drag it up. So there's kind of maybe the page curl of the final edge of paper that I want. Next, I'm going to highlight this node and make it symmetric, highlight this node and make it symmetric, and then I'm going to adjust each of these. Now this again is dependent on what kind of effect you want. You may want a rounder curve or a sharper curve. We'll just try and get something reasonably natural looking. You also might find that you see this page kind of comes up at the corner now, so you can also just hold the control key and drag this node down and this node out. You may have to adjust some of these other nodes if you're really trying to stay to a strict ratio of length to width on this piece of paper. So that looks pretty good enough for me. Probably just try to round this out a little bit more at that corner. Next, I want to create the back side of this curl of paper. So I'll highlight this and I will hit Control D to duplicate it. And I'm also going to change the opacity of this rectangle down just a little bit. It'll help me out a little bit later. So next, what I want to do is create another rectangle like that. We're going to make this one a different color. Doesn't matter what it is, it's just to distinguish between the two. And now I'm going to try and line some point around here on the edge up with one of those corner points, those rounded corners there. Get something close. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to single click this again till I get the rotation handles here. Before I rotate it, I'm going to grab that crosshair and try and line it up at that intersection point or something close to it. Now I can rotate this. Maybe you can see where I'm going with this. And what I'm aiming to do is to leave just a little bit of green hanging over here, just a hair. The less the better, likely. I'll take this blue rectangle and I'm going to send it behind the green one. Now I'll highlight them both and do a path difference. Now this, obviously we want this middle triangle to fit in this page curl, so I want to get rid of these two other ones. A quick way of doing it, the reason I wanted that green overhang is I wanted 3 separate closed paths. So now I can hit either Control-Shift-K or Path Break Apart, and now I can just highlight one, hit delete, highlight the other, hit delete, and I'm left with the one I want. And I'll move it over close to where it's going to be and just slide that into place. Okay, so there's the back of my page curl. Now if you want to get the colors a little more realistic, if you're going to do a photographic effect like I'm going to do here, then I'm going to want colors that are a little more photo paper like. So what I'll do is first of all go to yellow, somewhere in the yellow range. I'll back off the saturation a little bit and just increase the lightness. So you get kind of a cream color there. And now for the page curl, what I'll do is I'll actually, while I've got that page selected, I will triple click, I guess, this RGB value, hit Control-C to copy it, and I'll select the page curl itself, get in there and paste in that value again so it matches up, and then I'm just going to drag the lightness slider down slightly. I wanted the same kind of tone of color but a darker version of it. You could probably go a little bit, maybe even a little bit darker. You can also do a gradient here if you'd like to get more of a realistic effect. So if we did that, what I would likely do is start with this color, then hit the gradient button, linear, actually make sure that your opacity is up. Okay, so we're going to make this a little bit, maybe a little bit darker. Then I will go to a gradient and I'll edit that gradient. I'll start with this color, change to the other stop, make it opaque, so now it's flat and both stops are the same, and I'll make one of the stops darker. Okay. Once I've done that, I can then, when that's selected, I can hit the gradient tool, and I'm going to want, light around the tip and darker as it progresses to the corner, something like that. And that to me is still probably too dark, but yeah, maybe I can fix it up quickly here. Told you I'd mess up. We want both stops to be lighter than that, significantly. Something like that might be a little bit nicer anyways. Still looks a little greenish to me, but we'll leave it. Next, I'm going to create a shadow under the whole paper. So to do that, I'm going to window both objects, hit Control-D to duplicate them, and when they're both selected here on the duplicate, I'm going to combine them, Control-K. They become one shape, and I'll bring up the Fill and Stroke dialog box, change it to black, blur it a little bit. This is again to whatever your taste is, and once I have that shadow, I'll send it to the back and I'll drag it underneath my paper. I might move that down with the cursor key just a little bit. So now I've kind of set off that light paper here, if that's the type of effect you want. Next, I'm going to create a shadow under the curl. So I can select the curl portion, duplicate it. Instead of a gradient, we go back to a flat color, black, and before we blur it, what you might want to do is, if we just leave it like this and blur it, this blur here is going to be kind of doubled up and it's going to look a little heavier here. It might look a little unnatural. So what I'll do is double click to get the node tool for this path, and I'll just click and drag this end in a little bit before I apply the blur. So once that's selected, I'm going to apply some blur, a little bit too much, something like that. And I may actually even hit Control D to duplicate that, make it even a little bit heavier. And I'm going to send each blur behind that paper fold. So now we've got our paper with a little more realistic fold, perhaps. And next I'm going to show you how to put a picture on this, a photograph. So we start out with the paper, select it, the top, this cream portion, hit Control D to duplicate it, and drag it over. I'll probably change that to maybe something a little darker. It's not really that important, just to be a little clearer. And I'm going to change the opacity down to illustrate better what I'm doing. Next, I want to offset this in. I want a white border around my photo, or a paper border. So I want the photo, the actual bitmap, to be a little bit smaller so that some of this cream paper shows through from the back. Oop, didn't want to move that. So once that's selected, again, Control D to duplicate it. And now I'm going to hold Control Shift left bracket. That's basically the inset command. Control left bracket, I guess, is, I think it's Control Shift left bracket. Keep things centered, and I'm going to offset in to whatever kind of border I want. So that's where I want my photo to be. I'll double click it to get the path editor, and what I'm going to do is delete these paths, probably even, let's see what happens if we delete that path and that path. So what I want to do is, I want this to be a curve through here, fairly natural looking. So there we go, that's what I want. Now the only thing I have to double check is that once my photo is clipped to this shape, I want to make sure it doesn't hang out here. So one way to check is to, again, create a duplicate of that final shape, drag it over to where the photo is going to be, and you can see that I have a bit of a problem. This green part hangs out here. So what I'll do is double click it to get the path editor, and I'm going to add a node here. Okay, I'm going to make that node a corner, and I'm going to drag it in here, and I may drag these back out to get that same natural curve that I had originally. Make sure that the green part doesn't come out of the paper fold. You can also move this up if you'd like. And just play around with this till you get a shape that looks good. So now we can get rid of that stuff, bring this one back over, and it's time to now import our photo. So we'll go File, Import. There it is there. I'm going to, while it's selected, reduce its opacity just for the time being. And I might, shrink this, make it bigger, whatever you need to do. Make it slightly larger. Probably not the ideal size, won't get the whole sign in, but that's fine. So I might choose to clip it there. I'll send this behind the shape. I'll select both and then say Object, Clip, Set. So there's our clipped shape. Before we forget, we'll turn back up the opacity to make it fully opaque, and then we'll just drag it over. You can see it's way down below all the other layers, or the other objects. So what we'll have to do is bring that up to the top, and then bring it down a notch until you see the corner of the paper, and then probably 2 more notches to bring it below the shadow. It's not too evident on this photo because the dark blue here kind of doesn't show up much of that shadow from the corner. If you had a lighter color in this area, it'd probably show up more. And that is it. Actually didn't make too many mistakes on that. So I hope you find it useful. You can use it for some nice effects on a website or even a printed document you might do if you're looking for that effect. And that is it. Thank you for watching.